Welcome to the Health Coach Nation podcast. My name is Hailey Rowe, and I'm a sales and marketing coach and LinkedIn lead generation service provider. I work with health, life, and mindset coaches and online service-based business owners to help them get more sales, shift their time to the client-generating activities instead of just the busy work, and overcome that social media overwhelm. Let's get into the show. If you've been working at your coaching business for a while, you might have found out by now that it's not as easy as you thought to get clients. If that is you, I want to invite you to check out my free workshop sharing how to go from crickets to clients, creating a freebie funnel formula. So in the series, I share with you how to make a freebie that people actually want, that they actually opt into, so that you can grow your email list, so that you always have an audience to share your offers with. And you always have an audience where they are being nurtured by you, they're moving through the sales cycle, and you're not stuck every time you have a launch feeling like you have zero eyeballs on your content. So if that has been you, if you've been stuck in that and you know you need a bigger audience, you know you need to nurture your audience, go to haileyrowe.com/live event, all one word, to get the free series and get started. Today, we're going to be talking about how you can go from overwhelmed to focused with the weekly plan for more sales. So get ready to learn the plan. And before we get into the slides, I just want to give you an overview of what we're going to cover today. We're going to start by covering the 4 steps to conquer overwhelm. So if you are a business owner or aspiring business owner who wants to market, wants to make sales, but you don't know where to start, or you're overwhelmed with all the different options for how to market, we're going to talk about that. We're going to go through how you can shift from busy work that doesn't really produce results to actually using the weekly sales system to spend your time more wisely. And then we're going to go into some bonus tips for how to stay consistent with your marketing plan. Before we get into that, though, you can grab a free gift at haileyrowe.com/planning, and it will give you a step-by-step for today's training. It'll allow you to actually implement what we talk about. It'll take you through how to plan your week step-by-step so that you walk away with something tangible and you don't forget what we cover in today's video. So now, let me just introduce myself really quick. My name is Hailey Rowe. I'm a marketing and sales coach and consultant, and my mission is to help entrepreneurs and online service providers with how you can simplify client attraction, make more income and impact doing what you love, and be able to get more time back because you're not stuck in overthinking or overstressing yourself out with launches that are super time sensitive and high pressure, or what we call social media overwhelm, where you feel like you have to post all the time and you find yourself having anxiety about what do I say and is this the right way to go about it, and that whole perfectionist mindset. So I help my clients navigate through those things and instead be able to find a way of marketing that they enjoy, that they can stick with. And just a couple other things. I host a podcast called Health Coach Nation, which we've been lucky enough to be ranked in the top 1% on Listen Notes. I've been named as one of the top 25 coaches in Chicago, which I'm very grateful for. And I started doing the coaching that I do now back in 2017. But before that, I worked in business development and marketing for startups, and I loved it. And it made me realize how many startup entrepreneurs have such a gift or a talent or a service or a craft that they want to share with the world, but they get stuck with the sales and marketing side of things. They get stuck with how to plan as an entrepreneur. And so that's the kind of stuff that I enjoy helping them with. So let's dive into the 4 steps to conquer overwhelm. When you're feeling overwhelmed, we want you to be able to come back to a system or a criteria for how you make your decisions. So one that I'm going to introduce to you today that you can use is what we call the 4 Ds. Dream it, define it, design it, and defend it. So what I mean by that with dream it is we are going to set your vision, and I'm going to give you 4 questions to help you do that. So we needed to first just define what do you actually want so that when we are trying to combat overwhelm, we know what are we even aiming for? What's our North Star that we can look at for how we decide to make decisions? Then we need to define, based on what you actually want for your business, we need to define what are your SMART goals to get there? What's the path to get there? So we define the goal, then we design or create the systems to get you there, right? Because it's not necessarily just about what's the end goal, it's about the daily stuff that you're doing to get there. And then we're going to defend it, meaning we're going to plan for obstacles. We're actually going to think about what could go wrong. What could you see yourself doing or not doing that will impact how you get to your goal? And how can we actually prepare? So step one is dream it, like I mentioned, and let's get into it. So here are 4 questions you can use to get clear on what you actually want to achieve. And feel free to think in terms of the next month. Feel free to think in terms of the next 90 days. Feel free to think in terms of the next week if you want. But for this training, we'll talk about this month. So over the next 30 days, what do you actually want to achieve? And what are the costs or feelings or changes that you may need to be willing to experience to make room for this goal? And the reason why this question's in here is because a lot of times you just think of, oh, it'd be so cool and fun to get to XYZ. But we don't think about, well, what might I need to be willing to feel, willing to invest in, willing to change in my lifestyle to be able to get there? And we want to factor that in before you choose your goal, because if you're not willing to deal with some of these costs or big scary feelings you're going to have to feel or changes you're going to have to make to your day-to-day habits, then we may need to choose a different goal, right? But if you think it'd be worth it, if you are willing to experience certain emotions, certain changes to your day-to-day life and invest in the goal, then we may want to pick that as a worthy goal. So what do you want to achieve? What are the cost, feelings, or changes you're willing to experience to make room for the goal? What are the obstacles that you foresee getting in the way of this goal? Or what obstacles do you feel like will come up along the way to this goal? And then what are the team members, skills, assets, or research you might need to do to achieve this goal? So just pause this video if you want. You can brainstorm on these questions. These are getting us into that mode of reflecting and brainstorming so that we can plan accordingly in the next steps. Now, after we define our goal and, well, not define our goal, we brainstorm what we actually want. Now we need to refine it a little bit and actually design it into a SMART goal. So you all have heard of SMART goals, but the question is, are you actually following through on the SMART goals? And are you actually setting a SMART goal, or is it a vague thing every year that you just say, I want to make more sales, I want to book more clients, I want to start a business? Those are super vague. So let's turn it into a SMART goal. A SMART goal is specific, so it's clear and precise. It is measurable, meaning we can actually say, yes, I did it, or no, I did not do it, because we can measure it. It's attainable, meaning it's within the scope of what you feel you can do. So don't pick a goal so crazy and huge that immediately you feel defeated when you just think about it. We also want to make sure it's relevant. So is it something that's important to you? Is it something that's aligned with your values? And then we want to make sure it's time-based, meaning can we set a certain time frame we want to achieve it by? Now, that doesn't mean that we give up if we don't achieve it within the time frame we want, but can we give ourselves a realistic time frame that we're shooting for so that we create a little sense of urgency for ourselves to achieve our goal? Now, here's some examples of SMART goals that you could set to make more sales. One would be to start 20 new conversations per week via email or social media or LinkedIn with potential partners, potential clients, or podcast hosts. So if you're a business owner or aspiring business owner and you want to get out there and you want to start meeting people and you want to start forming referral partnerships, or you want to expand your visibility, or you want to actually meet people who might be your ideal clients, we have to start connecting with people, because the number of offers you make minus the no's you get equal your results. So if you're starting from ground zero, we have to start expanding your audience. So a SMART goal for you might be to start 20 new conversations per week. Now, another goal could be to offer your lead magnet or freebie if you're trying to grow your email list to 5 people per week. Okay, so that's another example. So notice how it's tangible because it's 5 people, it's per week, it's what are we doing? We're offering our freebie, so it's very clear. Another example would be hosting a quarterly webinar that I promote 1 time per day on social media for 14 days leading up to the event. Or attend 2 networking events per quarter and make at least 2 connections at each. So these are SMART goals because we're picking numbers, they're measurable. We can say, yes, we did this, or no, we did not do this. And once we decide which one of those or one that you came up with is your SMART goal, now we have to define your systems to get there. So I want you to brainstorm and go back to the first part of this presentation where we talked about what kind of things might you need to learn or what kind of obstacles might you need to overcome or what might you need to research to be able to get to your goal, because these are going to start to become systems that get you to your goal. So for example, I want you to think about your destination. Let's pretend we're on a boat and we have a destination we want to go. The boat is our goal. It's the thing that is steering us. It's how we're going to get to our destination. But the oars are the things that move us forward. So your systems are like the oars of the boat. They move you forward towards the destination. Those are the things that are most important. It's not necessarily the goal that's most important. It's the systems that are going to get you there. So system examples, let's go back to that SMART goal where we said we want to make 20 conversations per week. We want to start 20 conversations per week. If that was your goal, your system might be to have a process you use every time for researching and filtering leads on whichever social media platform you choose. So if you want to make 20 connections, we have to decide, where are you doing that? How are you finding these people? What are you searching in the search bar on LinkedIn, or what networking group are you going to, or whatever that looks like? So we need to figure out what's your system for that, for how you're going to do that consistently. Another example would be if you have the lead magnet goal where you want to share your email freebie with people, maybe one of your systems, so that you're not having to reinvent the wheel every time, is to create an invitation script you can send to new connections on LinkedIn, for example, to start to mention your freebie more often. So you're going to reuse the same example script and maybe you personalize it a little bit, but at least you have something to go off of and it's a system for you. Or you can identify what's the criteria of when I will offer my lead magnet, so I know when to do it and when to not do it, right? So systems are things that we're just going to define so that achieving or working towards your goal is easier and we have something we're going off of. Webinar goal, that example I gave earlier, if you wanted to have a system for that, maybe one of your systems would be to use, I have a webinar template I give clients where they can use the templates and fill in their message and their, tips and things like that, so that it's a system. It's based on what has worked in the past. All they have to do is fill it out. And each time they want to do a webinar, they just can fill out the template. Or giving yourself post prompts so that it's easier to do your posts leading up to the webinar, and giving yourself a system for how you write those posts. Are you going to batch them? What is going to be your process for that? For the networking goal, your system might be to research networking events 1 time per quarter in a bulk, like just decide which ones you're going to go to, actually sign up, and then obviously go, but you have a system for researching it each quarter. So once you define what your systems are, we need to turn them into something you can do on a regular basis. So in order to do that, we're going to have kind of a couple things we need to consider. Number 1, we need to have our weekly non-negotiables. So we need to decide what every week is a recurring task that is non-negotiable for you, because it's very aligned with your goals and it's very necessary to achieve your goals. We also need to decide what are your weekly systems that need to be recurring, or monthly systems if it's something less frequent. And then we need to decide what is going to be your rewards, because our brain probably will not stick to things that are not showing immediate gratification unless we have some way to get a bit of a dopamine hit and a bit of a reward when we follow through and when we keep promises we make to ourselves. So decide, hey, if I do my 20 connections each week, what's going to be a way I reward myself? Or what's going to be, when I get to 100, could there be a reward? Or, every time I allow an urge to procrastinate and still do my connections anyways, what could be my reward for that? Now, one thing that we can, just really quick to go back to the rewards, you could track your habits in a goal tracker. Sometimes our brain likes to see the X's and see us check off something. I had another client who had a jar and put a rock in the jar every time they did something. And so they'd see the rocks add up. So that was kind of fun, even though it sounds silly. Our brains are very visual. So how are you going to reward yourself? And then from there, how are we going to stay consistent? Well, we need to decide, is there any habit stacking you could do with these systems? So for example, let's say I want to start conversations with people each week. Could I, when I take my walk, because I already do my weekly walks or daily walks, could I send a couple voice notes on those walks to just make sure I get in my connection time? Or let's say you want to post more consistently. Could you decide that when you plan your day, because you always write your to-do list in the morning, could that be the time when you start a draft of a post? You maybe don't finish it, but maybe you always start your post when you're planning your day, so that those two habits start to get paired together and you actually follow through. Or could you, for example, let's say you're going to go to networking events, you want to send a thank you note to the host after. Could you pair the habit of writing a thank you note with something you're already doing? Let's say you journal every day because you're into personal development or something like that. So habit stacking is something you can do to make sure you follow through on your systems. Now, step 4, so we've defined our goal, we've defined our systems, we've started to break things down into weekly non-negotiables. Now we need to defend our goals. This is the hard part. This is, okay, we've set everything up. Now we need to do it when life gets hard, right? So refer back when we went through stage 1, which was the 4 big questions. One of the questions I asked you is like, what kind of obstacles could you foresee coming up along the way? So refer back to your list of obstacles, team members you thought you might need, skills you might need to develop, assets you might need, research you might need to do. And take a look at those and let's turn those obstacles or things that you have to work on into actual strategies. So what could get in the way of your weekly systems? What could get in the way of your goals? And write down, what can I do about it? What can I do about each one? And for now, for the purpose of this training, star whichever biggest obstacle you think would have the most impact on your goal. Meaning, I think the thing that would have the biggest domino effect on making or breaking my goal would be XYZ obstacle. And I want you to star that one and write down a strategy you can use this week to start to chip away at that obstacle, to start to remove that obstacle. And write what's going to happen, like what is your setback plan if you for some reason don't follow through on that? The thing that you've written down as your strategy, what's your setback plan if you don't follow through? How will you redirect yourself? How will you get it done even if you don't get it done on the timeline you want? And also ask yourself, what are you going to not do or say no to? Because sometimes we just come up with all these things we need to do as our strategy, but sometimes it's also about what we're not going to do. I'm not going to overthink this and take 48 hours to write that one post, or I'm not going to, when I post, get distracted on social media by scrolling everybody else and comparing myself to everybody else. And that's a habit I need to break because that's keeping me from doing the thing I said I'm going to do. So it's not always just adding to your to-do list. Sometimes it's what am I going to have to learn how to say no to so that I can get to my goal. Now, once you determine, okay, I think my top obstacle is going to be XYZ. Here's what I'm going to do about it this week. Here's my plan. Here's what I think I'll do if I don't follow through, how I'll get back on track. And now we need to craft your actual week. So what we want to do is we want to add all of your goal-related tasks and systems to your calendar. And how we do that is by getting organized. So when you sit down to plan your week, one thing I really like to do is first to start with a brain dump of both all the goal-oriented things you need to do, but also just all the other life things you need to do. I need to pick up my dry cleaning. I need to go to that holiday event or whatever. So brain dump all of your things that you feel are on your mind to do this week. Then I want you to look at the list and I want you to establish which of these things on this big, huge brain dump list are top priority, meaning there will be consequences if I do not do them. Like your taxes, you need to do them by a certain deadline or there will be consequences, right? Or your goal-oriented tasks. I need to start developing my system for how I'm going to connect with 20 new people a week. And if I don't, I'm not going to be growing my audience and I'm not going to be hitting my number one goal, which is X number of sales. So top priority tasks come first, and you're going to categorize those in a separate section of your list. Then we're going to determine which things on your list can be our really recurring weekly tasks. Like I'm going to have to touch back on these each week or else I'm not going to reach my goal. So, for those of you who have a health goal, for example, your recurring thing would be something probably related to exercise or meal prepping or whatever. If it's a sales goal, it might be recurring. You're going to have to connect with networking partners each week or whatever. So recurring tasks. Then moderate priority tasks, that's a separate category. Those are things that there's not going to be consequences if you do not get to them this week, but they're still somewhat important soon. Maybe next week, maybe this month, maybe over the next 2 months, whatever. And then later, it's just like ideas of things you really want to do, but there's no rush. There's no consequence if you don't get to it. So we call that a later or a someday list. And whenever you get new ideas, if you fall for shiny object syndrome and you get all excited about things and you don't need to do whatever task it is that you're all excited about right this second, there's no consequences, it's just a self-induced thing, you can put that on your later list so you still get to think about it and have it somewhere, but it's not taking up your brain space and it's not distracting you from your goals. So then once we have our weekly list kind of categorized, like here's my top priority things, here's my recurring things I do every week, here's later list, which is not going to go on this week's or today's list. Now we need to actually plan your day. So this is where we break down your top priority and moderate priority tasks into result-based tasks that take you 30 minutes or less, and you can say yes or no, I did this. So before you plan your day, you want to make sure the list you're pulling from is broken down enough to where you can take things off your list that can actually be done. So for example, if you wrote on your list, I need to create a website. Well, that's a gigantic task and it's very vague, meaning we can't say like, did I finish my website today? Like there's a million parts in that. We want to change that to maybe the tasks that are coming to mind for this week for the website would be things like determine or research domain names that match my name or my brand name. Maybe it's decide or research a web hosting service, right? So rather than just writing on your list, and this is why we always get disappointed with ourselves, is because we put on our list something crazy like work on website, but it's so vague. So turn it into something that can be done in 30 minutes or less. If it's not something you're positive you could do in 30 minutes or less, you haven't broken it down enough. And we want to be able to say, yes, I did this, or no, I did not do this. If it's something too huge where you couldn't just say, oh, I finished that today, then it's too broad and we need to break it down. Once you're looking at that broken down list, what I like to do at the beginning of the day is write my wish list for the day. Here are all the things I'm pulling from my weekly list that I would love to do today. And that becomes what I call my wish list. But then I make an actual day list where I take my non-negotiables, like, okay, here's the things I have to do today. I have to pick up so-and-so at 2:30. I have to go to a meeting at 4 o'clock. So the non-negotiables, things that you actually, have to attend or you committed to, those go on a separate page of your non-negotiables. So you have your wish list, you have your non-negotiables, and you'll get good at this, and this will only take you a couple minutes at the beginning of the day when you actually practice it. But what we want to do is we want to actually turn your actual list that has the non-negotiables into a time blocked list. So write your wish list and then separately write like your appointments. So your non-negotiables, 4 o'clock, I have meeting. 2:30, I have to pick up so-and-so. 10 o'clock, I need to do blah, blah, blah. And you're putting that in order and you're leaving spaces in between the times that are open. And in those open times, you're going to pull from your top priorities from your wish list and put them in where they belong. And you're not always going to be able to transfer your whole wish list to your actual day list. Okay. So we have to let ourselves have the wish list, but it's not going to be our actual plan. We're going to pull off of it and pick the most important things to us to put in our empty spaces for the day. So when you look at your actual to-do list, it's going to be your actual appointments, and then you're going to put your top priority tasks filled in where you can in the open spaces, and that's going to be what you do today. And you're going to get better at time batching and knowing how long things take you by practicing this and evaluating how it goes. If you find that you never have open spaces in your day, it's always pick up the kids, go to work, do XYZ, and you never have open spaces for starting your business if you're transitioning, then we need to actually say, okay, we need to make some changes in our life to make room for this, or we need to delegate, or we need to say no to more things so we can make time for this SMART goal that we've set for ourselves. So my top warnings when you are going through planning your day using this system is to give yourself buffer room for things when you're learning how long things take you. What I mean by that is if you're brand new and you wrote you need to research domain names for a website, but you don't even know what that means, and you don't even know domain names, and you don't even know where to start with that, you might need to add buffer room to research or to ask ChatGPT or to reach out to a friend who has a website and see what they say. But give yourself buffer room, expect it to take longer than you think. And then we want to also plan for things that could be in the way. So when you look at your actual list for the day, say, is there anything I need to just prep for before I get started so that this actually happens? And then the last thing is, don't beat yourself up if you do not follow your actual list to a T and perfectly. If you don't finish everything on it. What I do want you to do, though, is evaluate every week what went well, what didn't go well, what did I not give myself enough time for, what do I need to make more time for, who could help me with XYZ next week, and keep getting better at the process. Now, if you're trying to stay consistent with your weekly plan to get more sales and what you've defined as your top priority tasks, I want to just share with you a couple of tips. So we first just really need to define with your marketing or sales activities, how often are you committing to doing them? Is this, are you going to do a post every day, or are you going to do a post 3 times a week? If you decided you're going to make 20 connections, are you going to do that every day, or are you going to do that to start 20 connections per week? Define how often you're going to do whatever your sales or marketing planning activities are. Then define what are your exceptions for when you won't do these things. I will not do these things on Christmas. I will not do these things when I'm on vacation. I will not do these things if my kids are sick and home from school. Whatever it is, but define your exceptions, because so often we don't, and then we beat ourselves up and be like, well, I should have been doing that while I was, blah, 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 right? So define your exceptions. Define when will you review how it's going every week. Like, can you look back and look at how your marketing activities or sales activities are going, improvements that need to be made to the process, How will you track your wins and celebrate like we talked about? And is what you've written down as what you need to do a realistic starting baseline? So if you're going from 0 working on your business to now you've identified 12 different things and you're putting all of them on your list and you're going from 0 to 12, well, then that might be too big of a jump. So start with a realistic baseline and keep growing from there. What we want to do is show ourselves we can rely on ourselves and do what we say we're going to do with a realistic starting point. And then plan, what are your rebuttal thoughts for excuses? When you tell yourself, I can't do this today because blah, 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 how are you going to combat that? How are you going to overcome excuses? So just to recap, we have decided you're going to plan your goal for your business. You're going to make it a SMART goal and specific. You're going to design what systems you need to have to be able to get to that goal and get closer every week. The oars of the boat, remember? And then we're going to take whatever we think are our biggest obstacles and turn them into strategies or things we can do or mindset shifts if they're more of a mindset problem. And then we're going to schedule our tasks into our day with time batching. So we're going to make our wish list of what we'd love to do today, but then we're going to realistically look at our appointments, our time batches, our time blocks we have open, and fit within it something we can do for our business each day. So if you want help with this process and you want it to be more visual and you want to determine how it's going to work for you, I would love to invite you to book a free call with me and get my freebie. But before we do that, I just want to share one of my clients, Lisa, told me that she had been spending like 10 months on certain tasks. And within our work together, she was able to knock out things that she'd been thinking about and trying to work on for 10 months in about 3 or 4 hours. So knowing what to do is only half the battle. Having support, having clear action steps, having accountability, having a plan that's adaptable, that's what's really important to make sure you follow through. And if you need help with that, you can go to HaileyRowe.com and book a free consult. I would love to chat with you about your goals. And like I said, you can get the planning system we talked about today in more detail at HaileyRowe.com/planning. It gives you a step-by-step guide to plan your week. And I cannot wait to hear how it goes for you. It's HaileyRowe.com/planning. And thanks so much for watching.
So much for listening to this podcast, and if it's really helpful for you, I'd really appreciate if you share it and or leave a written podcast review. This tells the podcast sites that our show is useful and it will be promoted to more people that way. Thanks again.